So are we doing like a fake introduction, like we haven't been speaking for like the past 45 minutes already? Like, hi, hello like, thank you for having me. And
Okay, so here's the thing about like how I've been recording things. I've been trying not to kind of give the introduction of anybody at the beginning because I feel like a person's words and a person's thoughts and life experiences should speak more than their identity.
that's amazing
Um,
because I have no credential whatsoever aside from the fact that I'm Mauritian gay.
okay, I really want to talk about the content creation bit though. Like,
Yeah.
I tell you what, content creating, especially about I don't want to call it a sensitive topic, but it is sensitive for a lot of people, right? If it's not
Mm.
sensitive for us, it is a sensitive topic for a lot of people. But to choose to kind of like, hey, no, I want to speak about it. How did that come about for you?
Okay, that's a pretty interesting story. So I used to be a very, very closeted kid, but I was always very femme, so it was always kind of visible in high school. I like to say that my bullies basically came out for me before I even realized that I was gay, in the sense that I was labeled as gay, but in a very negative way, obviously, before I could even realize that and accept even that I was actually gay. Um, and my identity was basically always used against me. But, and of course, I know that it doesn't work for everyone in every situation because of a certain level of privilege that I've enjoyed because of like, my family and the friends that I got to be around. Um, I realized that for me, earning my identity was going to be what was going to change things around. I realized that if I told people, okay, I'm gay, what are you going to do about it? They couldn't, say anything. They couldn't attack me with who I was if I was not denying it and I was being in their faces about it, which is why I guess I'm a little bit camp on the internet. I think it comes somewhere from the past insecurity of trying to hide who I was. Now I am this blown out gay stereotype. Well, not stereotype, but just um, I try to be as loud as I can for me, yes, but also because over the years, people have been like have reached out to me, and it's been great exchanging experiences and talking about queerness, um, creating like those discussions and adding to the visibility of queer people in Mauritius. So that's kind of basically been um, one of the motivations for the occasional, very sporadical content creation that on my part. And there's also the innate desire to want to see people be happy and not be victimized for who they are. Even if I do talk about very sensitive topics at times, I think that progress isn't or is rarely made when everybody stays in their comfort zone. It is to a certain degree uncomfortable for me as well to put out so much of myself out there. But um, I think that the return has been very satisfying, both for me, it's been healing, and it's been apparently helpful to a few people. And just the fact that a few people have reached out to me and that we've been able to talk about our experiences um, has been incredible. I don't really have words to describe the satisfaction really that it's given me to reach um, out to people through content creation. So yeah.
I, it's wonderful that you say that. And like from your discourse over here, there were three things that really kind of like marked me. One of the things is this whole notion of putting yourself on the line. when you're putting content like that out there. Um, and I hate to say that there's a certain level of bravery or courage that is linked with being able to do such things. Um, but do you think that had you still been in Mauritius, you would have been okay writing as you do now that you're not back home?
I mean, yeah, because I started doing all those things like before. I even started my studies in Cape Town. But being in this very queer liberal environment certainly helped. Obviously, it shouldn't have to be a brave thing. I don't think that it should be difficult for people to talk about who they are and just to be themselves. But in the context of how things are today, it just happens to be so. It is a brave act. Maybe a little bit less for me because I come again from a certain level of privilege due to my entourage being very queer and very encouraging in general. But for many, it is an act of bravery, and even though it shouldn't be in an ideal world, I think that it's important to recognize that it's very brave to do to come out or to talk about who you are, because that's how we get to change things. I don't know.
Oh no,
That's
for
kind of
sure. And just say that again.
that's kind
Sorry.
of my perspective. Sorry, that's kind of like my take on it.
Oh no, definitely. And it's just like as you're, like saying those words, there's just this thing that comes back to my mind again and again. I remember when I was 17 and I was still quite kind of like, exploring what particular term I would go in. Again, like this attempt of trying to fit one in particular boxes because categorizing and compartmentalizing becomes this part of how you rationalize things apparently. And I remember sharing this with this one friend that, hey, I think I'm bisexual. And he told me that, yeah, you're saying this on this chat. Make sure you don't say this in public or people will think you're a slut.
Oh wow,
And
okay, that's
yeah,
brutal. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Like, yeah, that's that.
no, I mean,
Wow.
to be honest, like when that was said, I was definitely taken aback. There's no doubt in that. But again, like this natural um, Pavlov response almost that came from that person, that there should have been a closeting I had to go through, a masking that I had to go through to be able to be accepted in society, kind of hit me hard,
Mm. And
pretty
I
much. Like,
think that
yeah.
just from what you've said, I get this underlying sense that queerness for a lot of Mauritian people is perversion. It has nothing to do with the very human relationship that that is ever present in the queer community. It's just about perversion. It's just about something that's dirty. It's just sex, and sex is not dirty. But that's not like a whole other conversation. But to people, it's just seen as this very impure thing that is only related to sex. And if you're bisexual, you're a slut. If you're gay, you're some sort of like twisted pervert, and you prey on children, which I don't even know where people get those ideas. Like I remember like having relatives that basically linked being gay to being a pedophile. And I was like, no, honey, that's the priest from your church, not me. And well, that was a bit pushing it, I know, but I've always been a bit of it. And I think that in general, there's a lack of understanding of what queerness is supposed to be. There is also a lack of willingness to understand what queerness is supposed to be. I remember I was talking to a very straight friend of mine, not of mine, of mine, a very straight friend of mine. And basically, I was talking about this friend who was gay and who was just like really a great person, even though he was gay. Obviously, that friend was me. I was just kind of like testing the grounds.
Yeah.
And then my straight friend was like, yeah, okay, sure, like do whatever with your friend, but just be careful. And I was like, but like, why should I be wary of? Like, why should I be careful? And it was like, I don't know, like, dude, just be careful. Okay, fuck. And I didn't know what to do with that information. Basically, I felt like, okay, well, coming out is not happening. And just because there's this like we don't know what exactly we don't want to know, but there is this wariness that exists and this sense of an underlying perversion that is sadly inherently tied to queer identity in Mauritius.
I so agree with you in terms of, again, there's this narrative that's been happening in the age of the internet right now, and there's been several ways. I don't think there's enough literature right now in academia to really contextualize how social justice and social taboo conversations are really becoming a part of digital narrations, and how that's really going to influence policies or general mindset in real life. But I hope for there to be more literature around that. But to kind of talk and address a bit this perversion of the queer community and queerness in general that you mentioned, this instant association of sex and queer, uh, these two words. I think you hit it right on the nail there when you say that. Because I guess the taboo that is related around sex and the lack of open mindedness around sex not being an active purity, but more an active, something that you should be hushing about or something that you just talk about in the dark corridors, and you just don't like celebrate enough. And you really talk about it in quiet is by default something that is sort of given to the queer conversation as well. How like tell me a bit about your experience with regards to how you've had to fight off these misconceptions about sexuality, sexual orientation, being sexualized, sex, and kind of like having an almost cranial surgery of separating those two concepts altogether.
Actually, that is very, very hard. Because so for that, I think I have to contextualize and go back to my very own past, and maybe you might relate to it. Um, but when I wasn't intended to at the time, which I don't think exists anymore, but I must have been like 6, 7,
Great too.
and grade 2. There we go. I'm so confused by this new system, but anyway, um, so yeah, I was in grade 2. For Gen Z out there. And I feel so old. Oh my god, the times have changed. And this girl turned to me. I think I wrote an article about that. And this girl turned to me and asked me in Creole, "Est-ce que tu gay mal élevé?" And I was like, okay, well, I think that I'll have to translate. Basically, in English, that would translate to, "Are you gay or are you a pervert?" And I guess it sounds more poetic in Creole, but you already see this kind of like association with perversion. But when I was 6, 7, I had no idea of what it was to be gay because I spoke French like most Mauritians. I just associated the word gay with being happy. And I was like, I am a joyful kid, unaware of all the shit that was gonna come my way eventually. So I'm gonna say that I'm gay. Like, what's wrong with being happy? And then, like, this whole group of people in front of me starts laughing. They're like, oh my God, do you even know what that means? Like, it means that you want to kiss a boy, it means that you're in love with boys. And I'm like, oh, well, shit. Like, literally, that was what went through my mind. Shit, I gave the wrong answer, and now I look stupid, and I should have said that I was a pervert because apparently that's better than being gay. Being a pervert is better than being gay. And that's basically the first notion of gayness that I ever got. And then later in life, I basically have, I basically had to explain to my very, very Christian, and when I say very Christian, like there are people who go to church multiple times a week. They have church things over Zoom now. It's crazy. People thought that I was going to be the next pastor. It was, yeah, I had a very weird childhood. Basically, grew up in a Christian cult, but that's again another discussion. I had to explain to my very Puritan parents gay sex and the fact that it was different from gay relationships, and that the two can be complementary, but there's things like actual romanticism to the thing, and it's not just, you know, sex. And that's kind of something that I always try to talk with with the people that I interact with every day, because it's still very much um, in the collective mind of the country, at least from my perspective, that the two are unfortunately intertwined. And it's also the case within the community. Like, well, do you know what Grinder is? You should know.
No, you have to enlighten me. No, I have no idea. Sorry.
No, no,
What
no, no.
is it?
It's fine. It's fine, but this is. Oh wow, this is a whole conversation.
What do you mean? What is it?
Okay, let's start this. This is going to be an adventure for all of us.
Okay.
Um, so Grinder is what we gays use to supposedly date, but very, very honestly, it's a hookup app.
Oh, so it's like Tinder.
Tinder is the softcore version. Grinder is a very, very dark place. A
Okay.
very dark place. Like, so obviously you're not allowed to be on it, like unless you're 18. But I was on it since I was 15, and it was just a very toxic place to be. Um, but because it was so strange to be gay, and that I did have a few queer friends, which definitely was amazing. Uh, but because you do want to interact with more people like you kind of try to find platforms where you can find people who are like you. And the level of trauma is just wow. Um, Grinder
If I
is
can just ask
this.
you, sorry, if I can just ask you
Sorry?
here, how did you find out about Grinder? Like, who told you about it?
Oh, basically, I think we were talking like with friends, my like when we were 15, 16, we were talking about like hooking up with this like way older guys, which was very problematic in the sense that because we lacked the guidance that straight people usually have,
Yeah.
kind of, at least
Yeah.
more than queer people when it comes to sex and romance in Mauritius. We were desperately trying to get that elsewhere where people wouldn't
Yeah.
consider us as freaks. And so we'd log into those like really, really dodgy sites and talk to like weird men online. And one of my so basically I started this whole conversation to talk about how people on Grindr, because it's so difficult to be openly gay in Mauritius, associate their gayness just to the sex part of it. So they will have
Yeah.
wives, they will have a very heterosexual image outside of this like little perverse secret that they think that their identity is, and outside of that, they're not gay. I've had
Yeah.
people on Grindr who've told me, "I'm not gay. I'm just here to, fuck dudes," and then outside of that, and for me, I was like, okay, well, we can not do the label thing, but you're not straight, but you think that you're straight.
Oh,
There
I'll
are
just stop you. I'll just stop you there, Boris. Just because, like, I really want to kind of like flesh out and process the narrative that you just shared with us ever since you were in primary school, right? And now you're kind of like having a full circle moment over here, because that's exactly what I wanted to get to. This sort of sense of, because we don't have access to the right resources or the educated and safe resources, we eventually go to fetch for education and for support in places that are not necessarily the healthiest,
Mm.
and we ourselves can't take a judgment call on that. And to kind of like highlight a bit of that part about primary school and having sexual conversations at that age, I
Oh,
feel
no,
that,
that was secondary school. Like that was when I was about around like 15, 16.
yeah, so that was grinder happened for you like at 15, right? Like in secondary school. But if we
Yeah.
just kind of like backtrack to the primary school conversation, and why is it that I want to focus a little bit over there? Because I had similar conversations when I was in primary school as well. Remember, I was telling you like how you remind me of my primary school best friend. So
Oh.
even he was going through this whole trying to understand his identity, right? Because he was very effeminate and he was getting bullied for a lot of things. He was brought up in a household of three elder sisters, and
Oh.
obviously as a little boy growing up and you've only had feminine figures around you, I guess like you absorb those qualities, and that's just who you eventually become. But I remember him just bringing his sister's biology textbook to school one day, and we were what, 7 or 8 years old. And the reason why I'm sharing that, and he literally opened chapter reproduction, which is something that we learn in grade, help God, like grade 9,
In the
form
later
3.
grades, in secondary school, it's fine. You don't have to know. We're past that stage when, yeah.
Yeah. And just to tell you that if adults, if the Mauritian education system, and if elder people think that sexual conversations or conversations that very young people are not having, then they're mistaken. And that's why I really wanted to kind of like pause and sort of like highlight this, that okay, cool, there is a conversation happening, it's not being addressed by the right resources and the safe resources, which is why fetching, in that journey of fetching for guidance, a lot of little bumps happens, and then you bump into adults who are probably being exploitative, who are themselves probably lost. And sorry to have cut you there, but I really wanted to emphasize on that point a bit more. But go on with the grinder story.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, no, no. Actually, I think that's what I wanted to bring up to talking about Grinder. Now, like, out of this particular context, Grinder is a place for gay men to basically meet up, link up, and basically have sex. Like that's all it is meant to be. And I think that if you're in a good state of mind and you're a promiscuous person and you're having like healthy, consensual, clean sex, you're always protected and stuff, then it's great. Grinder is great for that. But for a lot of people, it becomes this very toxic place, and for younger people, it's, if I dare say, deadly. I didn't meet up with like boys or men when I was like younger or in high school. Like thankfully I didn't have the confidence, which I think was a great thing because I would probably have been exploited, at such a young age. But I know people who are basically teenagers, kids, like actual children, going to meet up grown ass men because they have nowhere else to learn how to be themselves. Like, because of the lack of resources, we end up having all this youth being exploited and abused just uh, because they want to understand themselves, and that is not okay. There's like all this hidden evil basically in not providing the resources about a topic that we demonize so much.
It's funny that you say that, because now that you put this into this perspective, it kind of makes me really cringe at the very thought that, to be honest, we don't even have formal resources for any kind of heteronormative um relationships either. Like basic sex education is not something that we even have within the Mauritian education system. And now when you think
I
about it,
did. I did had a sex education moment in primary school. There were people who came by and talked about sex a little bit. I must have been like in study
for,
time,
for I had that as well. What was it, like for 2 hours?
like probably just 45 minutes, and it was very hush hush. Like you could see that people were like, I don't know, maybe you had better people at your school, but like they were very uncomfortable. I did learn about HIV. The thing is, we do have to recognize that they do a few things right, but there's so much that can be improved on. I don't know how things are these days, if they still have these programs, but if they do, I'm pretty sure they don't talk about queerness and everything that's related to it. It has to be heterosexual. It's a lot of warning about all the STDs that you could catch if you have sex, which I think is necessary, but it should be more than that. It should also be about teaching kids to have a healthy sexual life instead of telling them that it's this thing that is horrible and that they shouldn't, that's so dirty and that it's just for adults. Like it shouldn't be this way.
Oh no, definitely. Like now that when you share your story, like I remember like the day the lady came, kind of like we were probably like 11 or 12, I don't remember anymore. But like she was literally like sort of like drawing the anatomy on the blackboard, and she was sort of like explaining how sexual intercourse happens. And I remember like she got into a very bad beef argument with our school principal, because he was of the belief that such things shouldn't be taught. And just having like seeing that fight in front of us as like 11-year-olds or whatever, however old we were, already sort of like put an underlying notion in our brains that this was something that was not meant to be talked about, and that in itself was not healthy. And to add to your point as well, just talking about the physical act is not even 1/8 of what sexual education can be about. The emotional health related to sex, gender
Hmm.
identity, viewing gender as a spectrum, questioning whether gender is even binary or whether it's non binary, decluttering and clarifying the difference between cis and trans. Like that basic, like there's so much more about sexual health and education that we should be talking about, we should be taught about, that doesn't happen. And at times I fear that if it's not even happening within the context of heteronormativity in Mauritius, when are we going to even expect such things for the queer community to even get to celebrate sex education?
Yeah, I know. It's you're totally right about that. We are obviously kind of like shooting for the stars, but I think that eventually we'll get there. Um, the first step obviously will be to have people talk about sex in general, even if it has to be, uh, for starters, in a very heteronormative context. But yeah, we just have to stop demonizing sex or anything that relates to sex, or even romantic relationships. Even that is kind of like, ooh, no, don't date. And then when you're done with your studies and you have a job, ooh, marry. Like, how am I gonna find a man? I do not know how to interact. Like, it's so weird how basically your whole life, well, in my case, I guess it was a little bit more relaxed. But like, I hear the stories of how girls have to like study, 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 career, 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 career. Now get married. You're 35. Your ovaries are gonna like go to waste. Get married. Just meet people, and you don't know how to do that because your whole life you've been told not to do it, and it's just this. It's the
I
I
I
cannot
would
wrap my
say
head around this stigmatization of
I so agree. Because
romantic
at times
relations.
when I think, oh no, for sure. Because at times when I think about, like now that on social we talk about relationship red flags, now that we talk about mental health, now that we talk about empowerment within relationships, or even like what's right in a sexual relationship, so what's wrong, what are boundaries, what's consent. Um, these were things that didn't exist 5 years ago
Mm.
on the
I mean,
internet.
yeah, on the Mauritian internet, I have to say that there has always been, for a very, very long time, a lot of scholarly work on sexual liberation and the queer movement. Like, we have traces of like scholastic like research and knowledge about all those fields that are nowadays like starting to get a bit more mainstream attention. We've had that for literally centuries, if I'm being honest. But it's just that there's a boundary between that knowledge that is, for some reason, I think seen as too complicated, and mainstream media in general. I think that we're now breaking that boundary. But if there's a thing that I got from studying philosophy is that um, there is so much literature and so much information about queerness, whether it's ethical or not, like what it is, that's out there. It's just only starting now to kind of transcend into the mainstream.
And I actually wanted to address that, and I'm so glad that you kind of like brought this point again. This terminology, right? Visibility. And I so agree, because even like when I read up, I'm like, oh my god, like this has already been talked about. This has already been addressed. There's research around this. But again, like um, to the commoner on the internet, right? At times you do want to receive information in a way that's more digestible, that is not super academically heavy, and there's a
Definitely,
fair
yeah.
amount of yeah, and there's a fair amount of amazing content creators and aggregators who are really kind of like trying to simplify those notions to be able to present it to a larger audience. This whole conversation about visibility, though, like, why is it that I want to have this little bit of a chat about this? I've been called out a couple of times about but why is it so important for you to even have to say such things? Like, just live your life. Like, what does it mean to you? Why should you even like talk about it? Or like, why are you like an attention hogger? Just live your life, like, what does visibility mean? It's nothing. Just you do your life, people will do the lives, that's it. We both know the power of visibility.
it's it's so easy to say that when you're for like you're coming from a position of privilege. Obviously you can live your life because you have all the rights are for you, like what, like, but you don't realize how hard it is. For example, when you're queer or like gay in my case, like just gonna take like examples based on myself, to not be able to marry, or well, technically, because my partner is not Mauritian and he is from a country that allows for same-sex unions, I would be able to marry him, but my union would not be recognized in Mauritius. And that is not just something that you'd want to have, but there's so much that comes with it. The legal recognition allows you to do so many things and gives you so many more advantages, uh, even like for taxes and stuff like that. It's a right that we're being basically denied. Um, there was a story that came out recently about this transgender transgender artist. Her name is Kaylee Wayne, and she lives in France now. And she needs to renew her visa to be able to stay there. But the Mauritian government won't provide her with any assistance to help her change uh, her sex and her documents, which basically is preventing her from like updating her visa or getting a new visa. And if she doesn't get it, then she has to come back to Mauritius, which is a country that doesn't allow her to be who she is to the to the full extent of what she should be able to be. So
That
it's
line
I
that you
think
just that line that you just mentioned right now, like, for her to be the full extent of who she is, I think that line in itself is so powerful, and it kind of relates back to queerness not just being our sexual activity, but also that we're human beings. We have likes and dislikes just like everybody else. We have preferences in our food habits. We've got careers going on for ourselves. It's not just that our sexual lives become the dimension and the centrality of our perspective, like our identity. Like, I really enjoyed that line that you said there. It was very simple, but it was so effective.
I like bouncing off of that. I think that's one of the reasons why I am so adamantly gay online is because I want to show people that you are not, if you're queer, you're not mentally ill, you're not a mistake, you're not a problem. There's nothing wrong with you. As a person, maybe there's a lot of things wrong with me, but like, I just want to add to the visibility and be like, I'm a normal person. I do stuff. I like cooking. I like watching movies. I like writing. I do all of this stuff, and I'm also gay. Well, being gay for me is a huge part of my identity. I'm very comfortable with the label. Some people are not, but that's a very personal thing. And yeah, the reason why I'm so loud is because I just want to show people that um, being gay is normal. It's different, maybe in terms of the culture of like who you like, but the humanness is the same, and that's what I want to kind of like show. And I hope that I've been able to do that to some extent. So yeah. Um, and I'm gonna jump on another topic here,
Yeah,
like
sure.
that basically is from some of the questions that or the topics that we discussed before the podcast. And one of them was how in politics there has been support from a few people who said, "Oh, all people are equal in Mauritius." There's even like a section in the constitution that says that there shouldn't be no discrimination for like against people that are of a certain caste, creed, religion, or sexual orientation, and we live in a democratic country, so we're all equal, right? This is not true. As much as people will say that we're all equal here, that we all have equal rights, we don't. I feel like it's so weird that in the penal code in the section 250, which is attached to the Constitution, uh, there is literally a law that equates sodomy to bestiality and rape. And we all know that this law in particular has finds its roots in homophobia. Um, so when we have things like that in the Constitution that also says that there should be no discrimination, it doesn't make sense to me. When we have a problem like same-sex marriage not being recognized, um, and no frameworks for trans people to be recognized again to the full extent of who they really are, we can't say that we have equal rights. And you're a politician, it's like all nice and great to show up to like the Pride March and to say that, oh, queer people are normal, we're equal, we all should have equal rights. But there's a difference between a common citizen, which I am, and a politician, which you are. You should be actually fighting for this, in the parliament. We, as citizens, are doing as much as we can through organizations or online and using our voices, but it all is restricted to the power that we have as an individual. You have more power and visibility as a politician to actually do things, not say nice things only. So yeah, sorry, I got a little bit carried on, but yeah, I just wanted to point out that even though we portray Mauritius as this rainbow nation that is very welcoming to tourists of all sexual orientations, we are not uh, as rainbowy as we like to paint ourselves. There is definitely this huge dissonance between what we project to the outer world and the reality of what an average Mauritian goes through. Um, because again, I recognize that I have a certain level of privilege. I've been able to experience both circles, the reality of a daily Mauritian and what tourists get access to, and those are two
Yeah.
different worlds.
Worlds.
Like when you go to a hotel, for example, it's all paradisiac. People are nice, like it's just like this dreamland. You can just be gay. It's okay. Nobody's gonna judge you because you're basically giving money to the country, and we love money. But you know, when you're just an average gay citizen, that you're not that useful.
I like the term that you use, dissonance, and I think at times we tend to think that we only experience cultural dissonance in Mauritius, but there's a lot of individual value dissonance that we also experience on a day to day basis. Just to say that at times when I think that people would look at the queer community and be like, oh, I'm disgusted by your choice of love, I'm disgusted by how you have sex, um, versus those same people not being disgusted by the lack of consent, not being disgusted that rape within marriage is still not recognized by law, not being disgusted by the full extent of street harassment not even being recognized by law or made provisions in for. It's almost like a lot of self questioning that we at times don't indulge in because thinking requires strength of character, thinking requires time, and it requires a lot of efforts that unfortunately not a lot of us choose to do.
I mean, it's very uncomfortable to challenge the notions that you are born with. I'm going to take my own example again because I think that's my strong suit is basically talking about my experience and seeing if out there people relate. But basically, I grew up in this very Christian environment where we're taught everything right and wrong from the very beginning. And it's very hard to kind of like get out of that. When I went to high school and met queer people, I was like, no, being gay is wrong. I was homophobic. I was raised to be homophobic, which is so contradictory as a queer person. But I was homophobic. I was queerphobic. And when my friends would be like, no, but it should be normal. And I was like, no, no, gay people are wrong. They're sinners. I was literally like, there was like a total 180 like transformation that happened. But it took me a lot of effort. Like it wasn't easy. It was very uncomfortable. And I was basically the little boy that would pray every night to God so that He would make my gay go away because I was afraid to burn in hell. And having to depart from that kind of state of mind is very uncomfortable and it's very hard. And it's not a thing that a lot of people are willing to do. Because I am queer, I had to undergo this journey. But people who are not queer do not have to because they are not victimized by those beliefs. Like, on the contrary, they're actually elevated by it because they get to compare themselves like cishet people who are virtuous by the nature of their orientation and identity as compared to the sinners. So, why would you want to do that very uncomfortable work when it would change the perception, the virtuous perception that you have of yourself? Why would you have to do all this thinking when you are in a state of mind or you abide to a philosophy that puts yourself above others?
What triggered you to start thinking otherwise?
I think I was always a little bit of a rebel. Like, like even when basically I went to church every Saturday for my whole life, like until I was 19, basically. Even though in the later years, like I already knew I was gay, that I wasn't, you know, Christian and all of that. But when I was a kid, I always asked questions, and I was like, I remember one time when I was like driving, like my dad was driving me back from one of my piano lessons, which was one of the moments where we got to talk a little bit because my dad works a lot. So that we like he would work late at nights and stuff. And when he would fetch me from my piano lessons in the evening, once a week, that's when we got to talk. He would take me out for like dinner and stuff, and it was like always this really nice moments. But we would have those conversations. So I remember that when I was like probably like 11 or 12, or even younger, maybe like 8. And all my friends at church were like, oh my God, I feel this connection with Jesus, which is great for them. I was like, oh my God, I'm such a fraud because I don't feel the connection with Jesus. Like, I'm going to burn in hell. I'm so scared. And I talked to my dad and was like, what is going to happen? Like, I don't feel the connection with God. I do not love God. Is he going to punish me for that? I do not love God. I love you. I love mom. I do not love God. And yeah, it was, I always basically had this like questioning that would kick in sometimes, but then be immediately devoured by the conditioning that I was born into, and it's always been a fight, really. It's not been like it's this instant switch from uh, having a certain set of beliefs to having a completely entirely new one, but it was basically just flickers of questioning that eventually um, solidified into actual difficult, hard, uncomfortable questions that I really wanted answers to.
You know, as you were talking, it kind of reminded me of an episode I was shooting with someone else. It was about allyship. And we kind of like came to this mini confluence that the closer the matter hits to home, the more you are pushed to start thinking. At
Hmm.
times, I think the
Yeah.
matter is too far away from home. It's not part of our immediate environment, so we just don't want to deal with it. But it's only when it hits close to home that's when you feel like, oh my God, no, like this requires some thinking, and I should start, giving my heart to this.
Uh,
Um,
yeah. I have a good relationship with my family, and I'm very grateful for it. Very, very grateful. Very lucky, and yeah.
no,
And ideally,
definitely.
I would love for more people to be able to have uh, that. And now I think I want to talk about something that is very close to my heart, which is
Conversion therapy. What is it?
yes,
How
yeah.
come were you presented with the option of going through a conversion therapy? Have you
I was
known
not personally,
people?
you know, I was not
Yeah.
personally presented with that option, but I started learning about it online when because I like when I was growing up, I just wanted to know more about queer identity, and I've basically stumbled upon the stories of people who had to go through those programs that are often very religious. I think that I'm going to put it out there. A great way to understand how damaging conversion therapy is to watch a documentary on Netflix called Pray Away, which has been in part directed by Ryan Murphy, whom I have so many qualms about. But this documentary is great.
Worthy, yeah.
Um, and now I think we can just get into it. What is conversion therapy for the people who will be watching? Conversion therapy is, from my understanding, any sort of program, either psychological or physical, that is meant to change your orientation or sense of identity. And that ranges from brainwashing you into thinking that you're not supposed to be the way that you are, or physically assaulting or sexually assaulting you until you become straight. There are therapies in particular that use electrodes that connect you to cables and that electrify you every time you show a response to queer content. That is a thing that has been done in the past. That is a thing that is present in countries like America, even though it's been outlawed recently. And that is a thing that is present in the Arabic world in particular, and that is totally legal because of their policies and perspectives on what it is to be queer. That is also a thing that we have to deal with in Mauritius, but that is never covered by the press because of the political precedent and the political um, problems and uprising that it would cause. Because those issues are so sensible, they're not talked about. But in the queer community, being part of so in the queer community, I have some of my best friends are like decades older. Like I've have friends who are like I've known gay men who are like 50 plus and they're like very good friends, but and friends who are like way older and who've had all the stories about like being queer in Mauritius. And I've learned so much from them. They've been amazing in terms of guidance, They've been amazing in the sense that they were basically a window of hope. I could see that you can grow old as a gay person and be happy through those people. But I also got to hear about those horrible stories of their friends going missing, their friends going to this camp
Yes.
and never coming
Yes.
back.
In
Or
Mauritius.
there is this very famous doctor that was openly gay um, and ended up being poisoned and died. And there are several other stories that I could share, but that for my own safety, I don't know if I can. There was a person that I loved dearly, and that I was not allowed to see anymore because their parents were going to send them to conversion therapy and basically in the Middle East. And I just wasn't able to do anything about that. For the safety of that person that was so dear to me, I had to cut ties. And it's so ironic that they're from a family that's so well to do in society and that has a name and that wants that status all the time. One of their siblings is an influencer that poses with the gays online that tends to be very progressive, but that basically colluded with the parents to out them and to have them sent to conversion therapy. So again, there's this disconnect when it comes to what you see in terms of allyship online and then the reality of these people and what they do and what they really believe in their everyday lives and that what they would do to their own families. Conversion therapy, because I lost someone whom I was in love with, um, is dear to me in that sense. But also, I think of all the other people who went missing, who were subjected to intense traumatic experiences, who lost their lives, and who, it makes me very emotional. I want this to stop, and I want to talk about it. Basically, conversion therapy is trauma that has only proven over multiple scientific studies and cases that it is pure torture that doesn't result in any change aside from just fucking up people. It doesn't make them straight. Conversion therapy does not work. It just fucks people up. It just traumatizes them and it just kills them. That's all conversion therapy is. Sorry, I just got a little bit carried away.
Like I just had to like take a moment, but
Sorry. I know that that was a little bit intense. But if you don't edit this part out, when you edit the podcast, um, if you're willing to put this out there, make this one of the main points and put it first. Yeah, no, I think this is a great initiative.
yeah. No, awesome. Thank you so much, Boris, for your time. It's been over 3 hours of, sharing time and essence right now.
Yeah,
But
but it's been great. Like, I honestly didn't see the time passing because I had such a great time. You probably have stuff to do. I guess I was just so consumed by our conversation that I forgot about everything else. And yeah, just for me personally, it was a great experience, and I hope that for the people who will be listening and interacting, that they will learn a thing or two and be able to share a thing or two as well. So yeah.
entirely. I really hope it enlightens and brings more parts of reality that is often hidden from the glares of traditional media.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I hope ultimately comes out of this initiative, and I think that's one of your goals anyway. So yeah, good
Awesome.
on you.
Okay.